They fined me $500 for parking my blue Jeep 12 inches past the HOA's painted line, then called the cops when I refused to move it during a thunderstorm. 48 hours later, I held a deed they didn't know existed, and a plan that would undo them in full daylight. Welcome to HOA Society. My name's Mark Ellison, a civil engineer out of Denton County, Texas, and if you've ever wondered how a homeowners board can act like a small-town government with no conscience, stay close. I tell these stories so decent people don't lose their homes to arrogance. If you're new here, subscribe. It keeps this channel alive for folks who can't afford lawyers. And let me know where you're watching from. I like seeing the map fill up with witnesses. That Thursday, rain hammered my windshield while red and blue lights flickered across my driveway. Officer Keller approached slow, hand resting on his belt. The HOA president, Linda Madsen, stood behind him in a mint green suit, holding a clipboard like a badge. "He's been warned twice," she said. "This is non-compliance, Section 8B parking." I wanted to laugh. I'd drawn Section 8B myself 10 years earlier when I consulted for the subdivision developer. But back then, I was just the contractor, not a resident. Now my wife was gone, my mortgage was mine alone, and that Jeep was the last piece of the life we built before cancer took her. Keller sighed, read the citation, then whispered, "You can move it later. Just sign here so I can clear the call." His eyes said he knew it was petty. I signed, went inside, and poured coffee strong enough to scrape rust. Through the blinds, I watched Linda photograph the license plate, stilettos sinking in the mud. That sound, the click of her phone camera under thunder, lodged in my head like a nail. By morning, the HOA email arrived. Notice of recurrent violation, $500 fine, possible tow within 7 days. It came with a digital signature from the board treasurer, Greg Trent, a guy who used to borrow my socket set. Beneath it, a line in italics. Continued defiance may result in enforcement escalation under Article 12. That phrase, enforcement escalation, buzzed under my skin. I walked the neighborhood, noting things the board ignored. Linda's own hedge 5 inches over the sidewalk, Greg's rust-stained mailbox, and 3 trash cans left curbside past 10 a.m. None fined. Selective Enforcement 101. I took photos, time-stamped them, backed them up twice. That night, my friend Roy Decker dropped by. Retired county surveyor, still smelled like pipe tobacco and graphite. "You look like hell, Mark," he said, settling his thermos on my drafting table. I told him everything, the citation, the cops, the grief still crouching in the house. Roy listened, then grunted. "You know the HOA's common parcel behind your fence? Lot 42E? I nodded. That easement paperwork was never recorded right after the builder folded. If you bought that strip for tax value, you'd own their maintenance access. They couldn't mow a blade without your say-so." The idea flickered. A quiet, lawful kind of power. But it wasn't about revenge, not yet. I thought of my late wife's words. Leave things better than you found them. The HOA wasn't just punishing me. It was poisoning a whole block of teachers, nurses, and retirees who signed those covenants trusting fairness. Before acting, I checked the county portal. Parcel 42E showed delinquent fees, $183.24, abandoned since 2009. The title company confirmed it could be auctioned in 30 days if unpaid. I started the clock. That weekend, Linda strutted through the community yard sale holding a two-way radio like she was dispatch. She stopped by my table, eyes on the Jeep. "Rules apply to everyone, Mr. Ellison," she said, sweet as vinegar. "We maintain standards. Here." I looked her straight on. "Then start with your own driveway." Her smile twitched. "Careful. We can make life very uncomfortable for rule breakers." Back inside, I drafted a folder labeled HOA, Case File Number 1. Inside went printed emails, photo logs, and a hand-drawn map of every easement and utility line in Oak Hollow Estates. The sound of the 3-ring binder clicking shut felt like a lock engaging. Outside, cicadas screamed in the wet heat. Somewhere down the street, a motion sensor light popped on, catching the glint of Linda's silver sedan idling too long by my mailbox. I wrote down the time, 11:42 p.m., and slid the note into the folder. Documentation wasn't paranoia, it was survival. And so it began, the slow, deliberate accounting of a homeowners association that forgot who actually owned the homes. By Monday, the HOA doubled the fines, now $1,000, with a bold warning: vehicle subject to removal under Article 12.3b. The letter had a fresh toner smell and a faint smudge where Linda's pen must have pressed too hard signing her name. I logged it, photographed it under the kitchen light, then folded it once and slipped it into a plastic sleeve, evidence number 06. When I got to work, Roy called. "You'll like this. County posted the next tax sale list, lot 42E's on it." He gave me the parcel number twice, slow, like a man savoring the taste of a secret. I checked the docket. Auction in 27 days. Minimum bid $185. I could have bought it outright that minute, but I wanted them to dig deeper first. Let the rope unspool. That evening, a red pickup from the HOA's contracted tow company cruised past my driveway, idling just long enough to make a point. I leaned on the porch post, waved my phone, and the driver rolled on. The camera flash flickered once for insurance. At Tuesday's community meeting, the smell of burnt coffee and copy paper filled the rec room. Linda banged her gavel like she was presiding over the Supreme Court of Petty. "Mr. Ellison," she said, "you are in chronic violation of our standards." I reply, "Ed, calm. I've complied with every lawful directive. Your enforcement is selective." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't test me." I smiled thin. "That's not a threat, Ms. Madsen. It's a record." Half the room looked away, pretending to check their phones. But one woman, a nurse named Karen Lopez, caught my eye and mouthed, "Thank you." That was the first sign this fight wasn't just mine. After the meeting, I found an unsigned paper under my wiper. "We know what you're doing. Cheap ink, sloppy hand." I logged it anyway. Knowledge nugget number 1. In most states, an HOA can't enforce a covenant inconsistently. That's called selective enforcement, and courts void fines if the rule isn't applied evenly. Always document comparables within 60 days. Back home, I started digging through the HOA's public filings. Every association in Texas has to file an annual management certificate with the county clerk: name, address, and property boundaries. Oak Hollow's certificate still listed the original developer's office, dissolved in 2010. That meant every notice they'd issued might technically lack a valid registered agent. I printed it, highlighted the line, slid it into the binder. Evidence numbered 012. That night, while updating my notes, my neighbor kid, Eli, 10 years old, rolled by on his bike. "Mom says they yelled at her for sidewalk chalk," he said. I crouched, looked him in the eyes. "Keep drawing, kid. Sidewalks belong to the people." He grinned and pedaled off, chalk dust trailing like victory smoke. 2 days later, HOA inspectors showed up with clipboards. They measured my mailbox height, fence gap, even the slope of my gutter spout. One muttered, "President's orders." I offered coffee. He refused, eyes nervous. When they left, I took pictures of each clipboard page in the reflection of my window, my own form of open records request. Halfway through the week, Roy and I met at the diner off F. M423, grease smell, clatter of mugs. "You gonna buy that parcel?" he asked. I nodded. "Quietly, through an LLC." He grinned. "Call it something poetic." I did. Blue Line Holdings LLC, after the paint they claimed I crossed. He chuckled. "That's cold." "Lawful," I said. As I drove home, the radio crackled with a weather alert. Storm incoming. Lightning cut the sky over the subdivision sign. I parked the Jeep squarely in my driveway, exactly per regulation this time. Cameras caught Linda's car circling twice before stopping at the curb. She stepped out, heels clicking, clipboard raised like a warrant. "Still think you can bully us?" she shouted over the wind. "Ma'am," I said, "step off my property. It's raining. You'll regret this." I almost thanked her for putting that line on my porch camera with date and timestamp. Early Friday, the HOA's email server glitched. Someone accidentally copied the entire neighborhood on an internal thread. I printed the exchange before it vanished. One line from Greg Trent. "Let's hit him with everything we've got. Make an example before others follow." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about aesthetics or rules. It was control, power for its own sake. And they were about to find out what happens when you pick a fight with someone who reads the fine print for a living. Hey, quick question to the viewers who've ever tangled with an HOA. Are you firmly against these boards, or do you think they can still serve a purpose if reformed? Drop your story or tactic below so others can learn how to stand up lawfully. And if you've never faced one, leave your message for the HOA folks reading this. They do read the comments. That night, I finished the LLC filing online. It cost me $300, 3 minutes, and a silent promise that I'd do this by the book. The confirmation email pinged at 11:57 p.m., exactly 21 days before the auction. Countdown engaged. Outside, the storm rolled back in, rattling the windows. I poured another cup, opened the binder, and drew a new timeline across the bout. Last blank page. Each line represented a move they didn't yet know existed. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt steady again. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a diesel engine idling outside. A tow truck again. I stepped onto the porch with my phone camera rolling. "Morning," I said. The driver looked uneasy. "Ma'am from the HOA said to stand by," he muttered. Linda emerged from her sedan in that same mint green suit, clipboard tucked tight. "Remove it," she ordered. "Hold on," I said evenly. "Do you have a court order?" She blinked. "We don't need one. Covenant allows emergency abatement." "Emergency?" I gestured at the clean pavement. "What's the hazard?" Silence. Only the drizzle and the tow's idle hum. Officer Keller happened to roll up again, same as before. He took one look, sighed, and asked Linda to step aside. "Ma'am," he said, "HOA authority stops short of towing private property from private driveways without a judgment." He turned to me. "You got it documented?" "Every second," I said, raising my phone. He nodded, wrote something in his pad and left. Linda's face flushed so red it almost matched my Jeep. She hissed, "You think you're clever." "No," I said, "just thorough." After they left, Roy called. "Check your email," he said. "Sent you the plat map overlay." It showed the HOA's irrigation main running directly under Lot 42E, the parcel up for auction. If Blue Line Holdings won that land, the association would need my permission to access or repair that line. That was the hidden hinge I'd been hoping for. For the next 2 weeks, I built my evidence wall. Emails, screenshots, even decibel readings of Linda's random nighttime wellness checks when 2 security contractors knocked on my door after 11 p.m. claiming to verify occupancy. I logged each event with time, badge numbers, and Keller's incident reports. Roy and I met with an attorney, Patrice Calder, mid-50s, gray bun, ink-stained cuffs, and a laugh that cracked tension like a match. She flipped through my binder, page by page, making low approving noises. "You've done half my job," she said. "They've overreached on enforcement authority, misfiled their certificate, and harassed you after notice to cease. That's 3 violations minimum. Keep collecting, but stay silent." "Silent?" I asked. "Always let a bully talk first," she said. "They incriminate themselves faster than you can print." Knowledge nugget number 2. Under most state property codes, HOA enforcement powers are limited to recorded declarations. Anything not properly recorded, wrong agent address, expired filing, renders actions unenforceable until corrected. At home, I noticed small things shifting. Karen Lopez waved again when she walked her dog. Old Mr. Price from 2 houses down started leaving his porch light on late, the way neighbors used to before fear set in. It felt like the community remembered itself. That Friday, I drove to the county courthouse, a beige block that smelled of floor wax and coffee. Clerk stamped the deed transfer for Blue Line Holdings LLC, Lot 42E, recorded at 2:43 p.m. The sound of that metal stamp echoed through my chest like a starting gun. Driving back, I passed the HOA office, a rented strip mall suite with tinted glass. Through the window, Linda and Greg were hunched over paperwork. Greg noticed me and slammed the blinds shut. I parked across the street, wrote the time in my log, 3:07 p.m. By Monday, retaliation escalated. 3 separate violation letters arrived. Trash bin placement, lawn edging, and visible tool storage. All dated the same day, all signed by Linda. I didn't even own a lawnmower big enough to cause offense. Karen came by, nervously holding her own letter. "They fined me for hanging a wind chime," she said. "Said it creates audible disturbance." "That's absurd," I said. "They said they'd tow my husband's truck next." I told her, "Document everything. Date, photo, sender." You'll need it soon. Late that night, I sat at my desk, surrounded by paper towers, the glow of the desk lamp hitting the rim of my coffee cup. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and a far-off dog barking. I thought of my wife again, how she'd paint those wooden birdhouses and hang them on the porch until Linda ordered them removed for non-conforming color palette. I'd taken them down, then rebuilt them in miniature, kept them in the garage. They were waiting. At 11:32 p.m., a thud hit my front door. A violation notice slipped under. I watched through the peephole as a shadow retreated. The paper read, "Final warning, board action imminent." My hand didn't even shake this time. I slid it into a sleeve, labeled it Exhibit 29. Before shutting down for the night, I wrote one last note in the binder margin. They think fear equals compliance. Let them believe that a little longer. By morning, I had my plan. Stay silent until auction day. Once that deed recorded, I'd hold not just leverage, but the moral high ground. They wanted power. I wanted balance. And before I close tonight, how far do you think an HOA should be able to control what's on someone's driveway or porch? Should there be a legal ceiling for fines? $250, $500, $1,000? Or no limit at all? Drop your view. Real people read these cases and laws evolve from what citizens say. When dawn broke, I drove past the subdivision's welcome sign, sunlight cutting through the mist. Linda's Jeep, yes, she drove one too, sat crooked across two visitor spaces. I snapped a photo. That irony would age beautifully. That photo of Linda's crooked parking job became Exhibit 37. I printed it on matte paper, slid it into the binder, and smiled at the symmetry of it. 2 Jeeps, 2 different rulebooks. The auction came fast. It was held in a low building behind the county annex, fluorescent lights buzzing, maybe 20 bidders total. Roy and I sat in the back, no eye contact with anyone. When Parcel 42E came up, the auctioneer's voice cracked through the PA. Opening bid, $185. A pause. No hands. Do I hear $185? I raised my card. Sold. Blue Line Holdings LLC, $185. The stamp came down hard, metallic. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled slowly, feeling that paper shift in my pocket. That strip of dirt and pipe now belonged to me. Back home, I poured a coffee and spread the documents on the table. Deed, parcel map, HOA filings. I drew a simple diagram. Irrigation main through Lot 42E, no recorded easement since 2009. That meant any repair, mowing, or trenching required my consent. Quiet leverage, exactly as Patrice advised. Knowledge nugget number 3. Easement rights can lapse if not properly recorded or renewed. Once lapsed, physical access across private property requires permission or a new grant. Otherwise, it's trespass, even for an HOA. I didn't tell a soul. Let them march straight into their own snare. 2 days later, an HOA memo went out. Annual landscape maintenance scheduled for July 18th. Access to common areas required. July 18th, my land. Perfect timing. Roy chuckled when I showed him. You gonna let 'em dig first or warn 'em? Let 'em dig, I said. Then we'll see who owns the shovel. The week leading up to that day felt like a coiled spring. Linda kept escalating, posted my name on the HOA website under chronic violators, sent a neighborhood-wide email suggesting I was hostile to community values. One of her board members, Greg, even hinted at foreclosure possibilities during a meeting. Unpaid fines can become liens, folks. Even engineers aren't above the law. The crowd murmured approval until I spoke up quietly. As neither are board members who misrepresent it. The room went still. Afterward, Karen approached me. I didn't know they could lose their own filings like that. They can, I said, and they did. You're really doing this by the book? Every line. She smiled faintly. Then you're not fighting just for you. By that night, 2 more neighbors had slipped envelopes under my door, copies of their own questionable fines. One was for overwatering lawn, complete with meter photos from a different address. I stored them all. The binder was getting heavy enough to feel like a weapon. That Sunday morning, I watched from the porch as 2 landscapers unloaded trimmers at the edge of my newly acquired lot. A white SUV pulled up. Linda's. Clipboard, sunglasses, mission mode. I stayed still, camera running. They stepped onto lot 42E, started trimming brush along the irrigation line. I let them get 20 feet in before walking over. "Morning," I said. "You realize you're on private property?" "This is common ground," Linda snapped. "Not anymore," I said, handing her the deed copy. "File July 3rd, 2:43 p.m. You'll find your irrigation main runs right through it." She blinked, color draining. "That's impossible." "Nothing's impossible with expired easements," I said, tone mild. The landscapers froze. I turned to them. "Gentlemen, you might want to step back unless you've got written permission from the owner." They did, fast. Linda's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I'll call the board," she said. "You do that, and call your insurer too. You've got a liability exposure here." Back at the house, I phoned Patrice. "We've got them." She laughed. "Don't gloat yet. They'll retaliate hard before they fold. Keep every notice unopened until the set piece. And for heaven's sake, don't lose your temper." So I waited. The HOA sent letters, threats, even posted a motion to fine me for obstruction of maintenance. Each envelope went straight into the binder, sealed, dated. Midweek, Roy stopped by with 2 cups of diner coffee. "You look calm," he said. "Just measuring the clock," I replied. "How long you figure?" "Until their next public meeting." He nodded. "Then what?" I tapped the binder. "Then daylight." Before signing off tonight, I'm curious. What's the line between maintaining community standards and abusing authority? When a rule becomes a weapon, does it lose legitimacy? Or is enforcement always sacred? Tell me where you stand. That evening, thunderheads built again over the plains, same as the first night this all started. I stood by the window, watching lightning crawl along the clouds, the reflection of my Jeep glinting in the glass. In a week, I'd be standing in front of that same board, not as a target, but as their landlord. The retaliation came faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, I had 4 new citations. Unauthorized lighting fixture, non-approved paint tone on mailbox flag, weed growth exceeding 1.5 inches, and failure to maintain harmonious facade. They didn't even bother to hide the absurdity. Each fine carried a $250 charge, totaling $1,000, the same number I'd logged 3 weeks earlier. I didn't respond. Not a word. Silence is a weapon when you have the evidence. By Friday night, I noticed the smear campaign had spread. A post appeared on the neighborhood Facebook page. "Certain residents think they can buy their way out of community responsibility." It was unsigned, but the tone was pure Linda. Comments poured in, some siding with her, others cautiously defending me. One line stood out. "This board acts like a private police force." That one had 20 likes in an hour. Saturday morning, while replacing a porch bulb, I caught the glint of a camera lens behind a parked SUV. Someone was filming me. I waved cheerfully. Let them. I wanted everything documented, even their intimidation. By afternoon, the HOA's courtesy patrol stopped by. 2 security guards in polos with embroidered badges. "Routine compliance check," one said, already scribbling. I asked for their credentials. They hesitated, then left without saying another word. I noted their vehicle plate, time, and direction. Evidence number 58. That night, I couldn't sleep. Wind pushed against the house, creaking the gutters. My wife's photo sat on the desk, same soft smile as the day we closed on this place. She'd believed community meant neighbors helping each other, not weaponized rules. I touched the frame lightly. "I'm still doing this your way," I whispered. "Lawful. Clean." Sunday morning brought the worst of it. Someone slashed the Jeep's rear tire, clean cut, sidewalls sliced like butter. I filed a report. Officer Keller again. "Got any enemies?" he asked quietly. "Just bureaucrats," I said. He smiled faintly. "Same thing sometimes." Knowledge nugget number 4. Under most state penal codes, intentional property damage tied to HOA disputes can qualify as harassment or criminal mischief. Document, file, and never retaliate. Law beats rage every time. When Patrice saw the photo, she pursed her lips. "They're panicking. Means your leverage is real." "How long before they realize what I own?" "Soon," she said. "That's why you'll use it publicly, once, cleanly, in front of witnesses and a neutral authority. You'll need to file a temporary access injunction to trigger review. The county inspector can serve as your neutral. Already in motion, I said, sliding her the draft email I'd prepared. That same night, Karen texted, "They just fined me again, for a garden flag." I replied, "Stay calm. Their structure's cracking. Just keep your paperwork ready." 2 days later, I filed the injunction request, County Case 24-CI-1787, citing trespass on Lot 42E without owner consent. It triggered an automatic inspection notice to the HOA and scheduled a public hearing within 10 days. That's where it would all unfold. But before the calm, they tried one more blow. Wednesday morning, a white envelope sat on my porch with bold red ink. Notice of lien intent. They were threatening foreclosure over fines they'd fabricated. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and sealed it into the binder under the tab labeled Fraudulent Instruments. I'd hit my lowest point that night. The fear wasn't for money, it was for the principle. If they could do this to me, with my background and resources, what chance did an elderly couple or single parent have? For the first time, I thought about moving, just walking away. But then, through the open window, I heard Eli laughing somewhere down the street, chalk squeaking again on the sidewalk. That sound pulled me back. You don't abandon people who still believe fairness can exist. The next morning, I brewed coffee before dawn and stood outside watching the sun cut through the mist. I whispered, "Almost time." Before we go further, I want to hear from you. When an HOA fines a resident for nonsense like mailbox colors or porch decor, is it still community enforcement, or has it crossed into harassment? Should states cap these fines, or leave it to courts? Tell me where you draw that line, or at least like the video so this story reaches someone who needs it. That afternoon, Patrice emailed, "Inspector confirmed attendance for next Tuesday's hearing. They'll bring a sheriff's deputy for decorum. Don't speak until I cue you." I replied, "Understood." Tuesday, 10 days since filing, 31 since the first $500 fine, and in all that time, not one act of retaliation had broken my composure. My binder was full, my land secured, and my case airtight. I walked into my garage, looked at the binder resting on the workbench beside a single symbolic item, one of my wife's birdhouses, repainted in its original bright yellow. I set it gently on top of the binder. "You'd like this ending," I said aloud. Rain started tapping the roof again, steady, rhythmic, like a countdown clock hitting its final stretch. The morning of the hearing broke gray and cool, the kind of Texas morning that smells like wet cedar and diesel fumes from school buses. I shaved, pressed a clean shirt, and slipped the binder into a leather briefcase I hadn't used since my consulting days. Every click of that latch reminded me this wasn't vengeance, it was accountability, dressed in order. Roy met me in the parking lot of the county building. "You sure you're ready?" he asked, sipping from his dented thermos. "I've been ready since the first citation," I said. He grinned. "Then let's go make some noise the quiet way." Inside, the public meeting room buzzed with low voices, folding chairs, fluorescent hum, a podium flanked by the county seal. Linda and Greg sat at a long table with their attorney, a slick man in a navy suit flipping through papers too fast to actually read. Behind them, a cluster of HOA loyalists whispered like it was a pep rally. The county inspector, Ms. Harlan, called us to order at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. Her clipboard was immaculate, every form tabbed and color-coded. Beside her, a uniformed sheriff's deputy leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Neutral authority in flesh and badge. Patrice opened. "This hearing concerns unauthorized access and maintenance activity on private property, Lot 42E, legally owned by my client, Blue Line Holdings, LLC. The HOA attorney smirked. "That parcel belongs to Oak Hollow Estates per our common area declaration." Patrice slid a copy of the recorded deed across the table. The paper slapped down sharp. "Recorded July 3rd, Book 924, page 1881. No active easement on file. Your declaration expired in 2009. The smirk faltered. Linda whispered furiously to Greg, who flipped through a binder that suddenly looked abwinty, fully thin. The inspector adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Ellison," she said, "do you have documentation of the activity?" I opened my binder, the metallic rings squealing as I turned the pages. "Yes, ma'am. Photos, timestamps, video logs, and contractor statements. They entered on July 18th without consent, conducted maintenance, and issued threats. when asked to leave. The deputy stepped forward to examine the prints. "That's you asking them to stop?" "Yes, sir." He nodded, jotting something in his pad. "Noted for record." Linda tried to speak. "This is outrageous. He's exploiting a technical error to obstruct community work." I kept my voice level. "Ma'am, I'm exercising property rights you failed to maintain. You enforce rules by the book. I'm just reading the same book." The room went still. A few neighbors in the back murmured. One older man clapped once before realizing where he was. The inspector cleared her throat. "Based on evidence presented, the HOA is in violation of county access statutes. Immediate cessation of activity on Lot 42E is required. Any future entry without consent will be treated as trespass. Sheriff's office is authorized to enforce." Linda's pen clattered from her hand. That was reversal number 1. Complete, lawful, and sealed by the county's own stamp. I didn't grin, didn't gloat, just nodded once at Patrice. She smiled faintly, whispering, "Leverage secured." Afterward, reporters from the local community blog cornered me outside. "Mr. Ellison, is it true the HOA trespassed on private land?" one asked. "I prefer to say the system worked," I replied. "Property rights aren't weapons, they're responsibilities. I just enforced mine." Roy laughed. "You sound like a campaign poster." "I sound like a man who's tired of bad governance." That evening, Linda sent a mass email claiming temporary suspension of landscaping pending legal clarification. But the damage was done. Word spread fast. Neighbors started reviewing their own fines, questioning votes, checking bylaws. And the board's authority, once absolute, began to wobble like a chair missing a screw. Before turning in that night, I filmed a quiet update from my porch, rain glistening on the railing. If you've ever been told an HOA can do whatever it wants, remember this. Every rule has to be recorded. Every action has to be lawful. Fear only works when we believe we're powerless. Then I asked my next debate question to the viewers. When private boards can issue liens, control access, and even involve law enforcement, should there be mandatory state oversight, or does that defeat self-governance? Drop your stance. Real change starts with conversations like these. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Neighbors forwarding messages, screenshots of HOA chat groups imploding. Greg had resigned for personal reasons. 2 others followed within hours. Linda held on, but her messages grew frantic. All caps, bold fonts, exclamation marks everywhere. Patrice called that afternoon. "Now you trade leverage for reform," she said. "I'm listening. Offer them a settlement. Waive your claim to easement rent in exchange for structural changes. Term limits, open records, audit transparency. They'll bite to save face. And if they don't?" She chuckled softly. "Then you keep owning the pipe they need to water their lawns." I looked out the window at the empty HOA office across the greenbelt. The blinds were closed tight, but I could almost feel Linda pacing behind them. The first domino had fallen. 2 days after the hearing, Linda called for an emergency HOA assembly. The email went out at 11:06 p.m., full of fury and damage control. Attendance mandatory for all voting members. Discussion: unauthorized interference with community governance. It was a gamble. She wanted the optics of control back. I wanted her to take the bait. The meeting was held in the rec hall, same place where he'd once read my first violation aloud. I arrived early, binder under my arm, Roy and Karen flanking me like quiet bookends of support. By 6:30 the room was packed. Neighbors, reporters, even Officer Keller in uniform, standing discreetly near the back wall. He nodded once when our eyes met. Linda opened the meeting with the same brittle confidence she'd worn for months. "We've been under attack," she began. "A resident has exploited a clerical loophole to undermine community order. I will not stand for blackmail." That word, blackmail, snapped through the crowd like a whip. I rose, calm, waited for her to notice. "Ma'am, you might want to be careful with that word," I said evenly. "It's a serious accusation, especially when every fact is public record." She smirked. "You bought land you knew we needed. That's manipulation." I laid the binder on the podium. "No, that's due diligence. You fined me $1,000 for parking 12 inches over a painted line, called the police twice, and trespassed on private land. I responded within the law, bought the ground your irrigation runs through, recorded the deed, and requested county oversight." Murmurs spread. Someone in the back clapped. Then more followed. Linda raised her gavel to shout over the noise, but I spoke first. Every homeowner here deserves transparency. Every dollar, every citation, every vote should be open to inspection. You call that interference. I call it accountability. Officer Keller stepped forward, his presence quiet but commanding. Ms. Madsen, he said, for the record, county inspection verified Mr. Ellison's ownership. Any further entry on that parcel without permission will be trespass under Texas Penal Code 30.05. Consider this your official notice. The gavel froze midair. The sound of her composure cracking was almost audible. Karen stood next to me, voice steady. You find me for a wind chime, Linda. You find a widower for a color tone. We joined this neighborhood to build something, not fear it. The crowd erupted. Fair to see you. Just murmurs, then applause that filled the rec hall. Linda tried to shout them down, but even Greg, sitting off to the side, wouldn't meet her eyes. The board attorney whispered something to her, low and urgent. She straightened, tapping the gavel once. Fine, she said tightly. Motion to adjourn. No, I said. Motion to reform. I laid out Patrice's drafted proposal. 2-term limit for board officers. Mandatory quarterly financial disclosures. Independent audit of fines and expenditures. Open records charter for all member requests. Fee rollback by 25% pending review. Silence, then whispers. Then hands began to rise. Karen counted aloud. 23 in favor. 24. 29. Even a few of Linda's former allies raised theirs. Only 5 opposed. Majority carried. The sheriff nodded to the inspector, who marked the tally. The gavel came down soft this time, not from power but from inevitability. That was reversal number 2, reform by consent, not conquest. The moment I'd been building toward. Outside, the air smelled like cut grass and electricity, the kind of night that feels charged with change. Roy clapped me on the shoulder. You just rewrote their bylaws with a coffee-stained binder, he said. Not me, I said. All of us. They just forgot what community means. But before we close this chapter, I'll ask you, if you were sitting in that room, would you have voted for reform or let the old board hold its ground? Should HOA boards face state audits like public agencies? Leave your thoughts. Real policy starts from public pressure. As we walked to the parking lot, Linda lingered near her car, eyes glassy. You humiliated me, she said quietly. No, I answered. I reminded you of the limits of power. That's different. She didn't reply, just shut her door and drove off into the dark. Later that night, I placed the binder on my desk, one last time. The cover was scuffed, edges worn, but every page inside was evidence of one truth. Ordinary people can outlast manufactured authority. The rain started again, always the rain, and I found myself laughing softly. Because somewhere under that storm, the lawns would still get watered, but this time by permission, not presumption. By dawn, the neighborhood looked different. Not physically, the same picket fences, the same oak shadows on concrete, but lighter somehow, like the air had been reset. A few houses had porch lights still glowing from the night before, quiet signals between people who'd decided not to be afraid anymore. 2 weeks after the meeting, the county clerk confirmed receipt of the new HOA charter with all reform clauses attached. Patrice texted me a photo of the stamped pages. Her message read, "Filed and effective. Congratulations, counselor." I laughed out loud. "I'm not a lawyer," I replied, "just an engineer who reads fine print." She sent back a coffee emoji and a single word. Same thing. Roy and I met that afternoon by the retention pond where the irrigation pipe ran beneath Lot 42E. He bent to pick up a flat stone, skipped it once across the still water. "Never thought I'd see the day they voted themselves limits," he said. "People change when the truth's public," I told him. "Sunlight fixes a lot." He grinned. "You gonna keep the parcel?" "For now," I said. "Maybe we'll turn it into a community garden. Something simple. Something that reminds them what shared ground really means." Karen joined us a few minutes later with Eli riding ahead on his bike. She handed me a flyer. First Oak Hollow Cleanup, BBQ Day. Sponsored by residents. No HOA letterhead, no signatures. Just neighbors, a date, and a list of dishes to bring. That alone felt like a victory. The weeks rolled into a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. Fines were reversed, audits published online, and new elections scheduled with independent oversight. Linda resigned quietly. Greg sold his house. A younger couple took a board seat and started posting monthly expense summaries. Transparency didn't just sound nice anymore. It looked like line items anyone could read. Then came the headlines. Local HOA reforms. After resident wins access case, county commends citizens for peaceful resolution. State senator proposes Ellison clause for HOA accountability. I didn't ask for fame, but if my wife could have seen it, she'd have smiled that quiet smile and said, "Leave things better than you found them." Before wrapping this up, I'll say this. If you believe I fought the right way, and that justice works when ordinary people refuse to bend, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so the next case reaches you first, and share this story with someone who's still scared to speak up. That's on us now. A few months later, on a cool October morning, we dedicated the new community garden. The plot sat exactly over the old irrigation line. Children planted sunflowers along the edge, and Eli helped me hang one of my wife's bright yellow birdhouses from a cedar post. The crowd clapped when I said, "This land used to be a fight. Now it's just soil again. Common soil." As I closed my remarks, a light drizzle began. Soft, harmless, cleansing. People stayed, laughing under umbrellas. The rain didn't chase anyone inside this time. Later that evening, I walked home past the sign at the subdivision entrance. The old plaque reading Oak Hollow Estates, maintained by HOA board, had been replaced with a simpler one. Oak Hollow, maintained by us. The porch light reflected on my wife's birdhouse as I locked up for the night. I thought of every document, every late-night coffee, every ounce of restraint it had taken. Then I whispered the same words I'd written on the last page of the binder. Justice isn't loud, it's consistent. And with that, the story closed itself, quiet, lawful, and human, just the way it began.